It is worse to give out an inauthentic message than it is to just keep your mouth shut.
I saw an opportunity in the marketplace where there weren't a lot of people who understood entertainment marketing from the brand side, and vice versa. There were a lot of people on the entertainment side that didn't understand how brands worked and how they thought. And so I looked at it and said, there's a gap there, and I'm going to fill that gap, and I'm going to be the guy that does these deals.
And when I got there and started digging in further, I realized that an enormous community was left out, and that was the disability community.
The world is evolving. The problems we're facing are too big to be solved by any organization alone. A lot is uncertain, but one thing is for sure: change is coming. And the voices you've just heard are the people driving it, entrepreneurial leaders. Welcome to From Problems to Possibilities, Entrepreneurial Leadership in Action, presented by Babson College. On this podcast, we'll meet the entrepreneurial leaders in the Babson community and beyond who are working on solving some of the world's biggest problems with the passion and skills that the world needs today. How does an entrepreneurial leader look at a problem and then get to the solution? I'm your host, Maddie Poirier, and together we'll go from problems to possibilities. Even though the advertising and entertainment industries have made strides in trying to be more inclusive and speak more directly to different consumer groups, work remains to be done. Research done by the Geena Davis Institute shows that representation for women, LGBTQIA+, race, disability, age, and body size was actually shrinking for some audiences in recent years. So, why does representation in media matter? How does it affect the business landscape in terms of sales and brand equity? And beyond even that, how does representation in the content we view every day affect consumers and how they view themselves? And how can entrepreneurial leaders lay the groundwork in the content creation ecosystem for creating authentic stories? In this episode, 3 entrepreneurial leaders talk about how authentic storytelling and representation in media make impacts not only on a company's bottom line, but on the customers they serve. We'll speak with an entrepreneur who's bringing inclusive casting practices for photo and video to a whole new level, Babson's own resident marketing expert who will help us break down the connections between representation, brands, and consumers, and a Babson alum who's an Advertising Hall of Fame inductee and visionary creative agency leader. Now, on From Problems to Possibilities, representation in media.
It is my absolute honor to turn you over to other clients and colleagues as we all celebrate Aaron's induction into the 2023 Advertising Hall of Fame. That's right. Aaron's pioneering approach to both branded entertainment and cultural marketing has allowed Lexus to speak to our constituents with an inclusive message. We see you, we hear you, and we respect you.
Aaron Walton, who lives in LA with his dogs Murphy and Winston, is the CEO and co-founder of Walton Isaacson, an Advertisers Hall of Fame inductee and a Babson alumnus. Aaron's visionary leadership, partnering brands with entertainment and celebrities to foster authentic connections across diverse audiences, is legendary in the advertising world. And his stories, from touring with Michael Jackson to partying with Boyz II Men, could fill up their own podcast. But before we get to his case studies, if you will, we wanted to ask Aaron about a very special mentor he had at the beginning of his career, fellow Babson alum Roger Enrico, the former CEO of PepsiCo, who Aaron worked for in the 80s.
When I first met Roger, he was a chief marketing officer at Pepsi and later became the president and ultimately the chairman of the board for PepsiCo. But what Roger did was spark for me an understanding that following some of my passions in art and entertainment, in celebrity, really could become a career that ultimately separated me from a lot of my competitors. And what Roger did at Pepsi at the time was really lean into entertainment marketing to differentiate that brand from its competitors, from Coca-Cola. And so while Coke was wrapping itself around traditional, Americana, Roger understood the power of culture. He understood the power of what entertainment could do to elevate the brand, to connect it with the youth culture that was going to be the future of that business. And so that was one of the things that he endorsed and pushed. And, he changed my life by putting me on the road with Michael Jackson for 18 months.
Aaron got a call from Roger on a Tuesday and had moved to LA by Friday for this gig and never looked back. After a long tenure at Pepsi, he struck out on his own, originally taking Pepsi and its many brands as clients. He took the lessons he learned from Roger and began leaning into his interests in advertising, culture, entertainment, and celebrity to form authentic partnerships.
And what I saw was a void in the marketplace for a couple things. One, for the way that celebrities could connect to brands authentically. It was really doing the groundwork on shared values. Do both the celebrity and the brand complement each other, and can they help each other grow in ways that they might not be able to do on their own? And I saw an opportunity in the marketplace where there weren't a lot of people who understood entertainment marketing from the brand side, and vice versa. There were a lot of people on the entertainment side that didn't understand how brands worked and how they thought. And so I looked at it and said, there's a gap there, and I'm going to fill that gap, and I'm going to be the guy that does these deals.
Eventually, Aaron wanted to grow and move beyond just food and beverage, and that's when, one night, as he was watching the Grammys from a hotel room, he had an idea for a brand and celebrity partnership that would take his business to a new level.
That year, Whitney Houston was performing, and she was in this stunning white Vera Wang dress. And I remember looking at it thinking, oh my God, she's just beautiful. She sounds amazing. Why isn't anyone doing anything with her? And I will never forget calling Dan Clark. Dan was at Pepsi, which is how I met him. And he was the VP of marketing at Pepsi at the time. And then he moved over to AT&T. And he was the VP of marketing at AT&T. And AT&T had this campaign called True Voice. And basically the idea of that campaign was AT&T had this incredible technology where they added more bass. But this is when we had landlines. And so they added this technology so that when you picked up the phone, you had more resonance. It had just a little more bottom to it. And I remember them doing these campaigns, and I thought to myself, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if we could showcase in real time what the greatest voice in the world sounded like with AT&T technology?
Aaron called Dan to pitch him the idea. Dan didn't pick up. It was late at night. And then Aaron went out with Boyz II Men, who he'd made a deal with for a client. The next morning, he awoke to the phone ringing in his hotel room.
Get this call in the hotel, and it was like this guy huffing and puffing. I was like, what the hell is calling me? Crank call in the hotel. But it was Dan. He was on the treadmill. And he was like, I got your message. I think it's a really good idea. I'm going to have my team talk to you. And I was like, what message? And I remembered, oh yeah, I called him last night as I pitched this idea.
Just let me hear loud and clear the real you coming through your true voice.
Another big success for Aaron came from the partnership between Lexus and the Marvel film Black Panther. Audi, whose cars famously graced Marvel screens, had refused the partnership, leaving an opportunity wide open for Aaron and his team. He understood the legacy of the story and what having an all-black cast of superheroes would mean to the Black community, and he knew it would be the perfect partnership for a luxury brand like Lexus with a strong affinity to the youth and Black communities.
It's really about, does this story help advance the brand narrative that we want, and is it done in a way that feels authentic to the story? When we worked on the Lexus Black Panther integration, we were very, very careful to make sure that this didn't just feel like we were plopping the car into the film. And we needed to make sure that the brand had permission to be in that universe. And so we were really careful about the steps we took to let consumers accept us in that universe. We started with a graphic novel, and we went to Comic-Con, and most people don't realize that the original Black Panther comic book actually talked about Lexus. And so we went back to kind of our roots. We went and figured out the right way to talk about that, which was to lean into a Takumi master, which is the highest level engineer, which in real life is the highest level engineer in the Toyota Lexus universe. And so we led with that kind of storytelling, because when you connected that with Wakanda, which was the most technologically advanced, world society, it made a lot of sense.
I'm Bami. I have a speech to give.
The first ever fully electric Lexus RZ 450e. Empower a future that lasts forever. See Marvel Studios' Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, only in theaters.
And then the rest of the things that kind of followed after that, which is the commercial, it was, the activation at Fashion Week. It was all of those other things that helped drive the brand love and the acceptance.
Brand love. It's a term Aaron used again when he explained his philosophy on advertising. It's a longing to both speak and be heard, and it's what drives him to continue to use his unique lens to further his work of authentically and unabashedly addressing all audiences.
So authentic storytelling, for me, really helps to increase brand love. And when we do the right kind of storytelling that not only touches the mind, but also touches the heart, that's where you have an opportunity to create loyalty for a brand with consumers. Consumers want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to feel like they're important to your brand, and we can see that right now in ways in which brands who aren't telling those authentic stories are getting called out. Brands who are backing away from the need to be inclusive are getting called out. And so for me, it was always about how do we lean into that? How do we make sure that we are representing the full spectrum of consumers that have often not had their stories told? I was one of them. Here I am, a gay Black man who often didn't see themselves in advertising. And it wasn't just about me, it was also about my mom, who wanted to see people like me represented. And to be honest with you, when I started this agency, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary, we leaned into the fact that the demographics in this country were changing. And if we weren't prepared to address those changes with telling the right kind of stories, then the clients that we had weren't going to win. And I'm competitive. I want to win. And so I had no problem leaning into culture and diversity when no one else was doing it, because I knew that the world was changing and we had to evolve with it. I also looked at diversity, equity, and inclusion very differently than I think a lot of other people did. I looked at it in terms of how to drive business. I looked at it understanding that companies that were gender diverse were 34% more likely to outperform companies that weren't. Companies that were ethnically diverse were 24% more likely to outperform companies that weren't. 70% of the employees that are looking for a job are looking at how diverse the workforce is at the companies. And so for me, that was really important. There's a German philosopher named Hegel who came up with something called the dialectic method as a way to explain how innovation and change happens. And his idea was every idea has an equal and opposite idea. And when the two ideas collide, they create a new one that consists of the best of the two. And so for me, I looked at culture and diversity as a way to bring these different ideas together that would change, collide, create something new and exciting that we hadn't seen before. And so I'm continuing to lean into that because I know it's the right thing to do to grow a business. It's not about making the pie smaller, it's about making the pie bigger. We're diverse by design, but it's not by accident, and it's not something that we take casually. And we will continue to do that.
I spoke with Anjali Ball, Associate Professor of Marketing at Babson, about authenticity in marketing. She holds a PhD in marketing and is a Babson Presidential Scholar. Her research looks at how arts, entertainment, and sports connect with diverse audiences, and why representation and embracing different perspectives to foster a sense of belonging really matters in those spaces. In addition to running her own consultancy on these topics, she's often quoted by outlets like the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. I wanted to ask her about why authentically representing and speaking to specific groups in advertising content matters. We'll go now to the Babson campus for that conversation. You're an expert in entertainment, sports marketing, and advertising. Talk to us about how marketing to diverse groups and telling authentic stories can drive the success of marketing campaigns.
Sure. I think the biggest thing when we're talking about diverse audiences is the idea that, number one, from a statistical standpoint, we find that when we communicate with and engage with diverse audiences, those audiences show more loyalty to us. They also have higher levels of expenditure with us. So from a business standpoint, it's really important. But the biggest thing for me as I look at kind of Babson and our entrepreneurial leadership that I always say is, if you're not marketing to diverse audiences, then you're missing out on the market. And the classic example I like to say is that, think about even 10 years ago, we would have many of our skincare lines would only target to women. And the thinking behind that was that, number one, women were making the majority of the expenditures in the household for skincare products, right? Lotions, cleaning supplies, whatever it happens to be. And so as a result, we should only target to women. And the reality of the situation is that that was a gross oversight on the part of those businesses, because what they weren't looking at was the fact that there were men who were very interested in clean skincare and things like that. And so they were losing out on that market because of their decision not to expend into doing research on the market and figuring out what they wanted. I think business's greatest gift is solving problems in society, and entrepreneurship is certainly a part of that. And when we look at our consumer groups, it's not just traditional markets that we look at, right? Straight, white, male, consumer groups who have things that need to be solved. So if you as a company are only looking at one group of people, you're missing out on the opportunity to really move business forward and move our society forward by addressing the needs of those other groups.
It's hard to ignore that these outcomes in business are also correlated with social and emotional outcomes on consumers who are viewing the content that we're creating, whether it's for sports, branded content, advertising. It all sort of becomes part of the zeitgeist that people are consuming. What are some of the outcomes on consumers when they're basically consuming content that's speaking more to them authentically?
I think our best marketers are people who can really engage consumers at a more true, authentic level. And in order to do that, the first thing that we have to do is see people as they are. There's numerous studies that say things like, if I say your name to you and I pronounce it correctly, there's parts of your brains that are associated with love, caring, and happiness that immediately light up, right? And that's because I've said something that feels true to the person standing in front of me. If we extrapolate that out and look at other things, what we know is our identity, who we are, becomes a part of how we are not only judged by society, but how we interact with society. So if we take something as early in our identification process as gender is one of the first ways that we identify with the world. What we know is recognizing that somebody's gender is important to them and makes them who they are will actually highlight those emotions for them, but also engage with them in a more real level. And whether that is dealing with women who are often underrepresented in certain situations, or men who are often underrepresented in other situations, or dealing with people who are non-binary, what we know is the ability to actually just recognize that that person is who they are and that they are valid is going to create a situation where they are going to be more loyal to us, they're going to engage with us more. And as we tap into their identity, the success of our brands, the success of our sports teams, the success of our entertainment actually become important to that person as well, which means that they want to see us succeed because they identify it as part of them. I always joke, I'm from the West Coast. I've been a Lakers fan since I was, I think, 7 years old, right? You can't see this, but I'm wearing a Lakers sweatshirt today. And obviously I teach in Boston, Massachusetts, right? Every year at the start of the NBA season, I pull out my Lakers beanie. It's a championship beanie when we beat the Celtics during the pandemic. And I put it on, and I do so for two reasons. The first reason is there's a fair amount of jostling back and forth between my colleagues and I who are misguided and huge Celtics fans. And the other part of it is that I always have random students or people on the campus who don't know me from Adam who come up to me and they're like, "Are you from LA? Are you a Lakers fan?" Whatever it happens to be. And that becomes a part of not only my identity, but it's reinforcing that person's identity as well. And when we think about that from the standpoint of our brands, what we know is we want to belong to something. And belonging is a really complicated reality, but it's also one that most human beings really, really aspire to do. And what happens is, because it's an authentic and kind of loving relationship, we create a bond, and that bond is something that is stronger moving forward. If we take that and look at some of our brands, we see that our best brands are doing these things all the time.
That's great. And I just wanted to note that the Lakers lost their last contest against the Celtics.
They did. And in fact, it's so funny because I wore my sweatshirt that day, and the next day I had 3 students who emailed me and were like, "Just wanted to make sure you saw the score." And I was like, "Saw it, thanks." Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk about authentic marketing. How do we do it right? And when brands are doing it right, how does it change cultural perceptions?
I think authenticity in marketing is something that is a wonderful outcome of the changes that we've had within corporations. And I think that the number one thing that we have to look at is we have omnidirectional communications at this point, which means that no company has the ability to control exactly what their messaging is that goes out or from where or through whom, right? And that's because of social media, but that's also because we've seen that consumers are taking more power in vetting the companies that they buy from, vetting the companies that move our market, and vetting the companies that they choose to engage with, either through social media or whatever it happens to be. And I think that this is a positive move in terms of consumer advocacy, because we should know what our money is going towards. So let me just say that this question of authenticity comes out because of consumer movements. And as a marketer, these are not things we can fight against. We need to embrace them and figure them out. The second side of the question is related to how companies can do authentic marketing. Companies first need to figure out who they are, because it is worse to give out an inauthentic message than it is to just keep your mouth shut. If you're doing something that is authentic to you, there will be people who hate you and there will be people who love you. And I think understanding that something that's inauthentic cannot be sustained over a long period of time is really important for these companies. And so when we talk about authentic marketing, I think that businesses need to first go back to the source, and they need to say, what is the mission of our company? What do we stand for? Why do we exist, right? What global problem or challenges do I want to address? And I think if you start there, then the authenticity of what you do from there is going to be better. I always say, whether it's on the right or the left, there are companies who tell their consumers who they are all the time, and they still exist, right? Hobby Lobby is one of my favorites to talk about. Hobby Lobby is doing great, you know? There are people who will never shop at Hobby Lobby, and that's okay, because Hobby Lobby is true to who they are all the time. Another example on the other side is Patagonia, right? Patagonia is one of the most political companies in the world. They're very openly left-leaning. They're very openly pro-environment and a lot of things like that. And they are dominant in the market because the consumers who care about what they're saying in a positive way are buying from them. The consumers who don't care what they say are buying from them. And the consumers who care about them in a negative way, they've kind of let them go as consumers. When we're talking about new venture in particular, this is actually really important. And the reason it becomes more important in new venture is we are literally entering the market and telling the consumer who we're going to be. The brand comes from the community, it comes from the company itself. When we're entering a market, it's coming more from the company than it's coming from consumers because consumers don't yet know us, right? If we compare that to a company like, Apple, we all know Apple. So we're all going to have opinions about it and we're going to impact the brand in a cultural sense on a much higher level. If I'm a new venture coming onto the market, I have more control. That control will go away once I'm in the market. The more clear who you are is, whatever those beliefs are, the more likely you are to succeed in the market because then your consumers will find you.
Christy Raymond, heard here on set for one of her photo clinics, is the founder and chief casting strategist at Humankind Casting.
Humankind is a casting and production company that supports any creative team when they are producing assets of photos, videos, any type of media. We are particularly focused on the inclusion aspect of casting and including the disability community in mainstream media. We have a roster of individuals that are children and adults. Every single person identifies as part of the disability community. And a client can know when they come here, they are getting authentic, actual talent that will represent that aspect of the disability community that the client wants to be seen in their imagery or in their video. They have had experience, they have worked with a professional photographer, so they're ready to get out there and get on set. So we promote the clinics, we represent the talent through our casting services, and we book them on jobs. I have to fill every point of that pipeline because it doesn't exist.
The talent pipeline Christy is referencing is well established in the world of able-bodied modeling. And Christy is familiar with it because she's worked in the industry for decades.
I've owned a modeling agency. It was my first business ever. Models Inc. on Newbury Street with a business partner. So I have the knowledge of how to develop talent, how to present talent, how to market talent to clients, put them up on the right type of websites and platforms to be seen.
Christy first recognized the lack of authentic diversity when she began working with a global client that encompassed many brands, doing photo shoots for products.
I was doing outside vending work as a casting company and finding that across the brands, they were just using the same faces. It wasn't even that they were using, the same age range. Literally, the same kids were being booked across brands. And so there was no diversity. And I brought that up to the photo studio. I had been working a lot with them, and that's how I actually got that first job there, was to really talk about how to diversify the cast that was being selected for the photos, primarily for Hasbro. And when I got there and started digging in further, I realized that an enormous community was left out, and that was the disability community. That's where I started the initial conversation and started working with them to sort of widen the lens and bring in not only a diverse group of talent of children that had diverse skin tones, but also ones that, would represent the disability community accurately and authentically. We did an amazing casting, and photo clinic with a nonprofit organization called Changing the Face of Beauty.
After working with Changing the Face of Beauty with Hasbro, Christy was encouraged by the progress in diversifying the talent pool. But she wanted to move the needle faster. She left to start her own casting venture, Humankind Casting, with the goal of specializing in inclusive casting with a focus on authentically representing the disability community. She partners with a fiscal sponsor, a 501c3 called No Limits Media. She runs photo clinics where new talent from the disability community can gain portfolio images that can be presented for acting and modeling work, along with the experience of working with a professional photographer. These portfolio images are building a talent pool that previously just didn't exist.
I have the skills to do casting and production, so I started the business to do that, and thankfully with some history in the industry, some clients that I'd worked with in the past came back to me. So I was able to get some bookings. Didn't always focus on the inclusion aspect of it if the project did not sort of allow it to be there, and would then use those funds to create these clinics because it's sort of this kind of a vicious circle. If there's no talent pool, there's no opportunity for creative or production teams to find talent from the disability community. So the excuse, which we've heard for years of we couldn't find the talent, it just becomes that, right? Because there's no pool. So if we build it, they will come. So we use these clinics to build the adaptive talent pool of available individuals, children and adults that can be considered for work. They have already had experience at our clinic, which is set up like a professional portfolio test shoot. We work with commercial lifestyle photographers, hair and makeup artists, wardrobe stylists, all of those crew members that would be on a set. And we create a setting and a place where, for a reduced cost, $39 a person, they can come in and get 2 shots to get their portfolio started, and then actually have those images on our website as part of representation in the market.
Christy often has to reach out to families in these communities to let them know that casting opportunities even exist. She partners with other organizations to do so.
When I was doing castings for sporting companies, I would call organizations that supported those kinds of athletes. So now I'm doing that with organizations that support the disability community in so many different ways. And that's how I'm meeting some amazing individuals that I can't wait for clients to meet and to use in their photos and their videos.
The one thing that Christy can't impact with her business is the desire for brands and creatives to consider the disability community for their media assets. She hopes they will continue to, as she puts it, widen the lens.
And now it's just a matter of how can we get the creative teams to be proactively saying, okay, I've got this group of talent that we're looking for this scene or this brand. You know, where is there an opportunity to bring in the disability community so that it's authentic and real? If it's appropriate, right? I mean, but it can be appropriate everywhere if we make it appropriate. Right? It is changing what we see from, we see a person with a disability. It's often, that's like an anomaly. It's not normal. We want to change that from being the anomaly to being normal and being part of an everyday scene.
It's also not lost on Christy how the experience of participating in a casting clinic often has not only a profound effect on the talent pool, but on the talent themselves and their families. She tells the story of a 7-year-old boy with autism who attended one of her photo clinics.
He came into the clinic and was very nervous, but he got out on set and mom behind the camera, smiling, getting him to smile and everything like that. After I sent them their pictures, she called me and she said, "Hey, Christy, I sat down with my son and we opened up the folder of pictures and I heard an audible gasp from him. And my thought was, oh my gosh, what did we do wrong?" She said, and I looked at him and he was smiling. And he's looking at his picture and he looked at me and he said, "I'm beautiful. I'm beautiful." She said, we have been telling him he's beautiful his whole life. But at that moment, in that photo, he saw it for himself.
Thanks for joining us on From Problems to Possibilities, Representation in Media. And thanks to our guests, Aaron, Anjali, and Christy, and for sharing with us how entrepreneurial leadership can impact the way we think about media. Coming up in the next episode of From Problems to Possibilities, join us as we speak with Babson alumni who are using entrepreneurial leadership skills to change the way their industry looks at sustainability.
One of the moments early on in my career when I was living in China, I was flying from Shanghai to Shenzhen, and I looked out the window of the plane, and I saw basically an island of styrofoam.
You're listening to From Problems to Possibilities, Entrepreneurial Leadership in Action, presented by Babson College. On this podcast, we hear about how entrepreneurial leaders identify and solve problems in our world straight from the people that make it happen every day in Babson's global community and beyond. I'm your host, Maddie Poirier from Babson College here in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Until next time.